Dave Aranda did not hold back. Why Baylor's 35-point win was not good enough.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And so there's high expectations, and we did not meet those today.
Did not meet expectations in a 35-point victory. That's where we're at with Baylor. And what's maybe more concerning is that I happen to agree with Dave Aranda on this one. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor. I'm your host, Cam Stuart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. Appreciate you guys making it your first listen today and every day. We will go through the aftermath of Baylor's 42-7 win over Samford, but why a lot of fans, the players, and the coaches are not all that happy with it. We'll go through that. Dave Aranda will go through one of the problems that they have on this defense and why it has not been very sharp to start the year. And Dave Aranda is looking at some self-reflection on that one. And was it a bad weekend for the rest of the results for Baylor? Did the Bears' schedule look not quite as daunting after what we saw this weekend? I'll tell you why or why not coming up on Locked On Baylor. But we start with a 42-7 victory, something that we should be celebrating. And 2 years ago, we probably would have been. Last year, a 31-3 over Air Force, you're celebrating that. A win is a win is a win. But when you come into this season, like Baylor has, with the expectations that they have, especially within that locker room, the high standard they are setting for themselves, all these returning guys, then the way they got to 42-7 against Samford was not good enough. It wasn't. And I had that eerie feeling during the game, after the game, and decided, let's see where I'm at on Monday. And on Monday, I'm still not happy with the 42-7. I'm just not with this team and the talent that they have. And it sounds like Baylor's not happy with that as well. And Dave Aranda said this was an opportunity on Saturday that they're going to need to look at this game against Samford if they're going to want to meet their expectations and their championship goals.
I think this game gives us an opportunity to demand more and to show that, hey, what is okay ain't good enough. And to just get by, that ain't it. That's not what we're doing this for. And that more is required, and really more is demanded.
You know what that was? You heard it a lot in college, right? C's get degrees. And I always used to say, yes, C's get degrees. They don't get you financial aid, okay? So with Dave Aranda and this Baylor team, what they did was a C on Saturday. That'll get you a win against Samford. It will. You're taking earth science with Heidi Markham, and that's a C performance that'll get you a passing grade. Ideas in mathematics is what that was. But if you want financial aid, the championships, competing for a Big 12 championship in this case, then it needs to be better than that. It has to be better than that. And it was just lifeless on Saturday. It's weird to say. I said this on the postgame, and it is weird to have this thought out loud, but it's like, they weren't really up for the game. And it's weird to say because they were up 14-0 in 5 minutes. And you're like, okay, this is how it's going to be. This is how it should be. Baylor's going to roll all over this FCS team that's 0-2, that can't score. And then they give up this Ephus pitch touchdown, which is clearly the funniest touchdown of the weekend. And you're like, oh, here we go again. And look, they only gave up 7 for the whole game. And they forced, 4 turnovers? And those are positives, but when you watched this game for the full 60 minutes of game time, I think you'd agree. It felt like they were going through the motions. It felt like all the classic trappings of an 11 a.m. game against a not very good FCS program. That's what it felt like. And a lot of teams in the country do that. A lot of teams do. Hawaii did it on Saturday night, right, against Portland State. BYU beat them by like 80, and Hawaii beat them, I think it was 23-3. One of those teams is for real, serious, and Hawaii is not. A bunch of teams did what Baylor did on Saturday, but not a bunch of teams have the expectations that Baylor has. And what struck me was in the second half. How about this for your drives? In the second half, after you were already up 35-7. Punt, 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 interception, touchdown, turnover on downs, and kneeling it out to end the game. 3 straight punts, man. That's as many punts as they had in the first 2 games of the season. They did it in the third quarter and into the, all in the third quarter on Saturday against Samford. 4 punts for the game. That's too many, man. That's too many 3-and-outs. They had 3 of them in this game. 3 3-and-outs. And they had another drive where they ran 3 plays, and the third one was an interception where they had negative yardage on that drive. Like, what was that, man? Where was the focus there? I had some of the comments in the postgame show saying that same thing. Emotions, focus. It wasn't there. And you can get away with it against Samford. Of course you can, as evidenced by the fact that you scored 7 points in the second half and still won by 35. That's not going to work against Arizona State. It might work against Oklahoma State, if we're being honest. It might. It might work against Kansas State. It's not going to work against TCU. It's not going to work against Utah. It sure as heck ain't going to work against Houston, a team that looked pretty darn good over the weekend. It's not going to work against Arizona, a team that looked pretty good over the weekend. If you are serious about competing in the Big 12, it's got to be better than that. And I think Dave Aranda is being quite honest with that in his post-game press conference, which, by the way, is, I would say, the most scathing press conference I've ever heard Dave Aranda do. You know, the tone was the same. So if you're in there and you're listening to the presser, you're thinking, yeah, all right, this is pretty par for the course. But the words he's saying after a victory like that, after a 35-point victory, it's the most scathing I've heard him. And again, this is not like throwing players under the bus or, you know, trying to embarrass them or anything. He just gave an open and honest dialogue about the team and basically said through all his answers, we're not at where we're supposed to be. And it wasn't as good as it was probably last week in a double overtime victory over SMU. It wasn't. And that they know the schedule is what the schedule is, and you're going into Big 12 play this week. And that performance they showed against Samford was not good enough. And Dave had, in the most scathing press conference I've heard him have, one of the most scathing answers I've ever heard him have. And that includes kind of going in on himself a little bit. But when he's talking about this defense, he does not hold anything back. That is coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel, who gave me a pretty good weekend, much like they did for, you know, the rest of the conference for the Big 12. So this is brought to you by FanDuel. It's also brought to you by The Game Cap, which is actually the one I was supposed to be reading here. The episode's brought to you by FanDuel, but The Game Cap is here for the long haul. Quick question for all you college football fans out there. If you could go back in time and sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yeah, I'm into that. I said, what hat? For me, it would be The Game. Okay, these aren't just hats. They're the same vintage styles fans wore back in the 80s and the 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same price they did way back when. When you use the code Locked On, you will get your vintage hat for $16.99. TheGameCaps.com is where you need to go. Grab Baylor's classic bar or retro circle design and use the code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for an exclusive discount, because legends wear The Game. It's also brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Like, we are in full swing here right now with college football season. Y'all need 5 Hour Energy, or else I don't know how you can get through all this. I know I wouldn't be able to get through all this. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. And what I love, how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. Can put it in my backpack, can put it in my pocket, can put it in my fanny pack. Take it anywhere you need. and get that boost when you need it. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in-store and online at 5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon today. Of course, something we have been critical of for this Baylor team all season long has been their defense. All 3 weeks of the season long, it's been this defense. 41.5 points a game going into this game against Samford. And if you look at the box score, you'll say, Cam, you're really grasping at straws here. You're really looking for something to be negative about. They gave up 7 points. They didn't give up anything after the first quarter, and they got 4 turnovers, which is what you wanted from them. You wanted 3 turnovers. They gave you 4, and you're still complaining. I kind of am. And it's because I've watched every game this team's played for over a decade now, and specifically the last year plus. I think their defense is better than this. I think they have more talent than what they're showing out there on the field. You know, I don't think they're owning the line of scrimmage at all. And I don't know if they did so against Samford. And that's a big deal. And so, yeah, that's why I do have these segments every week where I'm focusing on the head coach, who's also the defensive play caller and the defensive coordinator for this team, and Dave Aranda. He hangs his hat on this. He's a defensive guy. Remember, there's a term that I've banned from Locked On Baylor to say about him, but he's a defensive guy. And this defense is not only not good enough, which is what it was last year, but it's regressing. It's getting worse from last year to this year. And in a game like you played on Saturday, I've always said this about the FCS opponents. It's very rare that you're going to feel like great coming out of it, of like, man, they did this, this, and this, and they're going to win the Big 12. You know, if it's 66-7, you're probably feeling good, but there's nothing that you're like, wow, and they did this against Samford or Tarleton or Albany. No, it's a kind of a lose-lose. Most of the time, you're feeling a little concerned about something because you're playing an FCS team. I'm going to play this from Dave Aranda. It's over a minute long, so it's a little long for this show, but I think it's a great answer. It's actually not even an answer to a question. This is in his before he gets the questions, he just gives his soliloquy about the game, and it is a soliloquy with Dave Aranda. And he gives this answer. It's over a minute long, and it is really scathing about himself and the team and where they're at and what the standard is for this program.
I think defensively, I think we needed to play with more physicality up front. You know, I was blitzing a lot, try to stop these people. All credit, a lot of credit goes Samford and how hard they play and their level of effort. You know, they had a quarterback come in second half and was frankly playing harder than us. And so defensively, we have to play with an increased level of physicality up front. Today was not good enough. And so, disappointed with those things. And this is the thing, when you talk about it in the beginning of the week, you talk about it throughout the week. We showed a fair amount of film from Baylor, Texas State from a couple years ago. There's New Mexico, UCLA. There's all these examples. And then, there's talks prior to running out the start of the game. There's talks at halftime. At the end, defensively, there's kind of talks prior to taking the field every possession. And so a lot of pulling teeth today, and I wish that wasn't the case. A lot of growing up in that respect, and, we're all here for it.
For those of you fortunate enough to not know this, pulling teeth is not fun. It's not a good experience. It's not like, hell yeah, we get to pull some teeth today. Dave Aranda used that term a couple of times in his post-game press conference, like pulling teeth to get these guys to play. And that is really concerning. When you hear answers like that from Dave Aranda, that's when there's that little part in all the Baylor fans, not just Scotty Swingler. When you hear an answer like that, there's a little bit in every Baylor fan that wishes the locker room sounded like this.
It's about time people say, I don't want to schedule those guys anymore. I don't want to play those guys anymore. And if my standard's too high, then leave.
That's what people want to hear. And Dave Aranda is literally laying it out to you of like, look, we're jacking guys up right before the game when they run out there. I'm doing it with my defense before they even take the field. In fact, it's gotten to a point where it's bad enough that we're showing them game film against other lower level FCS teams that we've played the last couple of years and shown them that this wasn't good enough, that this intensity wasn't good enough, that this physicality wasn't good enough. And then they run out there on the field and they do the same damn thing. It's the same thing. And it's been a major knock, if not the most major knock, against Dave Aranda in his 5 years as the Baylor coach. Is you just wonder why so much of the time there isn't that oomph, there isn't that physicality that every Matt Rule team had, or that energy that every Art Briles team had. Why is it not here with this guy, who is a defensive coordinator in the Big Ten and the SEC and has won a national championship? Why can't he get these guys fired up? And he's basically saying it there like, we're trying. And we play up to our competition for the most part. When we face a good team, we can get out there and we can get after it. But when we face a not so good team, it's pulling teeth, is what he's telling you. And it's just, that's frustrating to hear. After the momentum this team had at the end of last season and how downtrodden they were and motivated they were after losing the Texas Bowl to LSU and loving this schedule to open things up and fighting back against a good team last week, a top 20 team on the road that has playoff experience, you fought back in that game and needed every second of it to win. To me, that's where you should be like, where you have a bunch of veteran guys on the team. You say, guys, that is what it takes. What we did in the second half against SMU, that's what it's going to take every single week. Not just when we play Arizona State, not just when we play Utah, not just when we play TCU. Every dang week, that's what it's going to take. And 1 week later, it's Dave Aranda saying it's pulling teeth. And the other secret little hidden Easter egg that I like in that quote, because I like Dave being honest, but the other thing is he finally refers to, the calling of the defense as me, as I, not us, not our defense, not our defensive unit. He said, I called this a couple of times. I did this. So we're not doing the whole Matt Pollage, D. Kino, defensive coordinator in name only. He's admitting that's on me. And I'm not trying to be like, oh, credit Dave Aranda for telling the truth, because this is still a pretty damning thing that he's saying. Not to say that it can't get better, because I think it can. I think it can be improved upon, but that's not what you want to hear. That's not what you want to hear, especially after a 42-7 victory. And we will talk this week about why I feel good against Arizona State in some respects, but I've got some more to worry about after a 42-7 victory. Did the other teams around Baylor make the Bears look even less impressive? Let's talk about it next on Locked On Baylor. But first, let's tell you about Prize Picks, sponsor of today's video and the Locked On Podcast Network. The daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day. But on Prize Picks, being right, which I know you are a lot, means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can make your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, it's easy, it's my favorite way to follow along with the football Saturday or Sunday. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good and it pays to be right. Today's episode is also brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel, and I mean it for real this time, okay? The NFL season is here, and FanDuel's making sure you're ready for kickoff with that can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Patriots money line. A little bit more money in my pocket this week. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Coming back here on Locked On Baylor, looking around college football, not just the conference, in this week where it was a pretty good weekend for the Big 12. Saturday slate undefeated. But as I talked about last week, how much Auburn and Baylor need each other and how big that Baylor win was for Auburn to get back in the rankings, it's only fair that I revisit it a week later because Baylor's opponents before them, the two teams they faced before Samford, both won. But neither one looked all that good. And we do take style points into account when it comes to these kinds of things. First off, SMU playing on the road at Missouri State. Why is that happening? Why were they playing at Missouri State? I know you might want to get out of Texas a little bit, but that's the best you could do. You couldn't play UNLV in Vegas' stadium or something. You can't do what Oklahoma did and play Temple in Philadelphia. Like, what is happening with that? That never used to happen, ever. And by the way, you fall down 10-0 against Missouri State, and you have to make this comeback. I want to say it was 28 unanswered to win 28-10. You know, you do that against, I don't know, Kentucky in the SEC or Purdue in the Big Ten, two teams at the bottom of their conferences, but in pretty good conferences. If you beat them 28-10, that's fine. Chalk it up. That's a win. Nothing against it. But when you're doing that against a group of 5 team, what are you doing, man? That's a team that was in the college football playoff last year. Missouri State holds them to 28. Baylor could do no such thing. They held them to 38 in regulation, 45 when it was all said and done. So that's not looking too great. And we look at an SMU team who I still think is good, solid, but they lost a lot of production from last year. And they shouldn't have scored 45 points against Baylor. It shouldn't have been that high-scoring an affair. And so we're still questioning as to what this SMU personnel is, whether they are going to be a player in the ACC this year. That didn't help your cause very much. It really didn't for your only signature win of the season so far. The other thing that's been helping you is that Auburn looks good. And that a 14-point loss to them at home doesn't look all that bad when Auburn's a good team. And they beat Ball not State, by 39 points. But when they beat an in-state rival by only 16 at home, by 2 scores. Oh, yeah, by the way, that in-state rival's not the Crimson Tide. It's South Alabama, USA. The Jaguars went into Auburn and put up a fight. They only lost by 16. So your 2 opponents that you faced so far that are definitely going to help you out when it comes to your strength of schedule. Both won, but neither looked all that impressive. Meanwhile, your opponent next week, Arizona State, I thought did look good enough. Like, Texas State's not a bad team at all. We know that. We've been watching the last couple of years, and they gave Arizona State a run for their money in San Marcos last year. Another one. Why are you going on the road to play there? Baylor's done it before. Don't get it. But they won by 19. They covered. They won by 3 scores. That's a pretty good-looking victory coming off a loss. So Baylor was a bit underwhelming in their result, and all the other results around them and the teams they've already played or the teams they're looking to play are also underwhelming. In fact, if you look at the first 6 games, right? Yeah, first 6 games of Baylor's schedule, and you look at those teams, the one who had the best weekend was Oklahoma State. They didn't play. Arizona State, fairly impressive. Auburn, not impressive. SMU, not impressive. Kansas State, the very opposite of impressive. Like whatever the complete antonym of impressive is, that's what Kansas State is so far this season. So all of those things do get taken into account when you want to be in the college football playoff picture. And Baylor still wants that. They still have that opportunity. Crazy as it may sound, 12-team league, you're one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the Big 12. You've got a very realistic shot. But those things get taken into account, especially when you're playing in the Big 12. When you're playing in the Big 10 and you lose to an SEC team by 14 at home, but you still go to your conference championship game, doesn't matter. Does not matter. If you're in the Big 12, it does matter. It absolutely does. And they're going to be looking how you did against other conferences. And if at the end of the season you lost to the 9th-ranked team in the SEC and you beat the 5th best team or 6th best team in the ACC, it's not looking too great for your resume. Not looking too great. But let me know what you think in the comments below, what this weekend's results did for your outlook on this Baylor team that didn't impress many of us in the 42-7 victory. What an opportunity to bounce back against Arizona State next week. But good news is Baylor's not 0-2. Although, if Baylor was 0-2, Baylor was 0-2 against Auburn and SMU, maybe they'd be in the rankings. Which leads us to Locked On Baylor's trivia question of the day. Notre Dame is sitting there at 0-2. The alphabet has more W's than Notre Dame right now, but they've still got a number next to their name. Maybe that's all it takes for Baylor to get ranked, which, by the way, I don't think they should be ranked. I don't. But maybe if they lost 2 games, they'd be there. The trivia question today, before Notre Dame, who was the last team to be ranked in the AP poll after starting 0-2? Who was the last team? What year was it? And if you really want to impress me, you could tell me which team won the national championship in said year, because that'll be a little ironic. Let me know the answer to that trivia question in the comment section below. As always, first one to get it right on YouTube or tweeting at us at Locked On Baylor gets a shout out for the next day's video and the next day's trivia. So we will catch you up on that on the next edition. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day of your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.